Hi, my name is Chuck Mazzarella, and I am the author of The Lion's Shares. The Lion's Shares is a collection of short stories and poems. There are 39 short stories and there are 8 poems in the book. And I just wanted to show you this. Okay. There's a website for the book itself. It's a Wix, a Wix website. The easiest thing to do would be to Google The Lion's Shares and all right, Google me if you want to, Charles Mazzarella. And anyway, this is a series of videos where I'm reading stories from the book. And tonight's story is called History Makes Heroes Out of Ordinary People. Excuse me. All right, a little preface for this one. I guess the advice that is given to some writers is to write about what you know. So I did. I have about 60 or more stories that I've written. There's 39 in this book, and I'm working towards a second book. And a lot of them are, otherworldly or whatever you'd want to say, from nothing that has nothing to do with my experiences. This particular story has a little bit from my life in it. So I could say it's a little bit of autobiographical information. It's not, the names are changed to protect the innocent and all this other stuff. But just to enjoy this particular story about a grandfather and his grandson set in the future as they think about what they're going to do for America's Tricentennial in History Makes Heroes Out of Ordinary People. Great-grandfather Ryan putzed around in his garden while his great-grandson Evan was busy being a kid, exploring, asking questions, playing games with his younger brother and sister. The old man and the not-so-young boy both celebrated their birthdays recently. Ryan was born on the 8th of July in 1993. He just turned 78. Evan breathed his first few breaths earlier than he was supposed to on July 16th, 2061. He is now 10. Both babies of July have been discussing the fact that America's Tricentennial is only 5 years away. I think my math is off. Oh, he's now born in 61. It's 71, 76. I had to do the math on that one. Anyway, both babies of July have been discussing the fact that America's Tricentennial is only 5 years away. They are excited about the upcoming historic event. We will be alive to see our country turn 103 times, Grandpa Ryan. Yes, EJ. It will be a time to remember. Ryan Schlosser was briefly in the military, but when he was Evan's age, he started to become very interested in American history, the Civil War, the Great Depression, and U.S. involvement in the World Wars. He has since shared his passion for the past with his mentally precocious great-grandson, Evan James II. The two gentlemen talk of going to one of the bigger cities on the 4th of July in 2076, where galas will be planned. Will it be Boston or Philadelphia? Thousands of celebrations, some nicer than others, will take place all over the country the weeks before, during, and after that anticipated anniversary. They are leaning towards traveling to Boston for 3 reasons. The city is closer to their homes in Connecticut. Evan's grandfather has a cabin in Maine, and it's easier to walk around in Beantown. Can you imagine the fireworks show in New York, Washington, Chicago, and LA? Every wonderful city will proudly try to outdo one another. Phoenix, Miami, San Antonio, and Springfield Villages, boroughs, towns, and nice-sized cities will probably have the best displays. Hot dogs will be grilled, chicken and brisket will smoke, while potato starts to turn rancid in the sun. Faces will be painted in red, white, and blue. There will be millions of balloons, concerts, and bingo too. Wyoming, Seattle, Mars, Union City, and Conestoga Flats will all have memorable celebrations. Even in Paris will the citizens and cake be patriotic, at least for one day. Those would be the towns named for the famous city. But in the land of brie and baguettes, they may lift a glass to our good health. Hopefully our friends in Britain have also gotten over that grudge by now. Ryan used to work in a factory that makes the composite beams used in the biodomes ISEC, the International Space Exploration Consortium, builds on the moon for communities like Freedom 1. He entertained the idea of teaching history, but his job at ISEC was more lucrative and meaningful to him. It's all about job satisfaction, but getting paid a good salary doesn't hurt either. Ryan nonetheless read history and is a good storyteller. As it is not too hot outside, Ryan and Evan James still sit under the patio. The elder has a story to tell. History shows us that dates and events are significant. An event simply happens, and it may become worthy of writing it down and remembering, recording its significance in some way. You have heard me talk about other events through the years. Today, I want to tell you from what I have been told and studied about the second, 100th, and 200th birthdays of our country. I will also talk about one or two other significant days, but those will be a surprise. To many people, it is just a day. Hooray! America is 100, 200, or 295 years old. It shows us we are stable and prosperous. This is an accomplishment compared to the history of other countries where their revolving door governments and stench of corruption. This day is like any other day in a country that likes to celebrate holidays, anything to have a party. We are very reflective on holidays and special dates, especially since 9/11. Dates like these mean a lot to a lot of people. Our patriotism and pride in who we are is displayed in many ways, including our celebrations with fireworks and music. On the Centennial and Bicentennial were held the country's largest celebrations with anticipatory events weeks and months before. Parades were held, then afterward people would gather at local community events, block parties, and barbecues, or spend time with their family eating the traditional foods and swimming in the warm summer sun. Excuse me. From these came larger festivities capped off with firework displays. That was one of the nicest gifts China could have given to us. Fireworks shows in olden days were held infrequently. Today, we appreciate them more often. What actually do we celebrate? Tradition plays a role, and in placing importance on a certain day, we remember what happened and who were involved. Survivors of battle and their families are grateful to be alive, helping further the prosperity of this nation. History has made heroes out of ordinary people. Life in the colonies was becoming intolerable under English rule. Brave and wise people decided to act. On July 4th, 1776, representatives of the loyal but weary colonists and the smartest minds of the time met in Philadelphia to discuss drastic and immediate change. They were tired of poor living conditions and having that foreign government make decisions for them without colonial consent. The war underway, 55 men signed their names to a letter to British King George III, declaring that the colonies were now a free country with sovereignty. The United States of America was born, and we continue to revel in our independence while we apply our almost boundless freedoms on a daily basis. Let me now show you an example of our compassion. The morning of July 4th, 1863, brought a calm to the small farming community of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. For 3 days, the Civil War hovered stagnantly among the faith-filled, humble farmers in the area. Death viciously swung its farm implement, claiming over 50,000 lives in that brief elapse of time. Fighting had moved elsewhere, but remained the wounded and dead to be lovingly cared for. That occupied the townsfolk for several weeks. Repairs took months or years. Still, people gathered to remember that first day after the recent battle was significant. Hoopla would be saved for later months and years. Solemnity was enacted while bandages were applied. In 1876, we turned 100. Our belated birthday gift from France was the Statue of Liberty. She still stands almost 200 years later, a symbol of strength and freedom to warm our hearts. A lot had happened in the preceding century, but we still are not on firm ground. Still just a child, really. We grew up so much in the next 100 years, from horse and carriage and railroads to automobiles, rockets, and jets. The country became stronger, and citizen pioneers relocated to new and unfamiliar places. Many more travelers came to America for a chance at a better life, and because the U.S. was looked at in a special way. We still are. Where else can you find someone from probably every country in the world? With the bicentennial came newer music, disco. Your grandmother and great-grandmother still like those old songs. People were happier because there was peace. We loved all the new technology and the promise of what the future would bring. Now we live on the moon, have traveled to Venus, and want to travel as far as we can to the planets we know. Though Grandpa Ryan is 78, he has a lot to say and is still very sharp. But sometimes he gets sidetracked to use an old expression, and has to pause and remember his big points, as a literature professor of mine, Dr. Dayananda, used to say. Evan James, being the considerate boy he was raised to be, went to the kitchen and returned with somewhat tart lemonade on ice with mint. How Ryan likes it. EJ is not fond of mint. Ryan continues after finding his way. We'll talk more about the Tricentennial later. I wanted you to think about America's second birthday, however, during the Revolutionary War. Everything good is worth fighting for, EJ, though I would prefer that we did not have to go to war. Often when we have to for our beliefs, our freedom, and to help others, we do. Fighting started in Lexington, Massachusetts in 1775 with the shot heard around the world. Traditional battlefield exchanges went on until 1783. During the war, there were many not-so-famous battles, still examples of the courage of others. One was the Battle of Wyoming, in a small rural community located in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania that would later be called the Borough of Wyoming in 1885. On July 3, 1778, Fighting in the area escalated and culminated in an exchange from muzzleloaders between the local colonists and others. Those loyal to England were called Tories, and they fought with Indians from the Susquehannock tribe that was part of the Iroquois nation. British troops may also have been involved. Over 60 New Americans and Tories were killed in the deadly disagreement that took place in that usually quiet farming community located on the banks of the Susquehanna River. The 4th of July, 1778, found those citizens still shaken from the prior day. They nonetheless decided to help the wounded and care for the deceased. The realities of that day superseded the need to celebrate. That would happen later for those who endured and survived. Remaining militia moved further south and west, leaving the area by the 5th and 6th of July. Did people remember that 2 years prior, 55 men signed the country into its existence? Some recalled while others were unaware. As the first major war of the country was in its 3rd year, not too many new citizens paused to reflect on this matter. The families of the 55 and they themselves remembered. Also, when they were not engaged in battle, men in the Army, Navy, and Marines, these organizations themselves only 3 years old, did have thoughts of the significance of the day. If they knew what day it was, it is easy to forget dates in the repetition, action, or inactivity of battle. Further bloodshed was still to take place in the area now known as Wyoming. 2 historical events come to mind. First, the kidnapping, torture, and possible murder of a young colonist by the name of Frances Slocum. She has since had a state park named for her in the region she was mistreated. Excuse me. The second, something more vicious. Located a block and a half from where your grandfather grew up, lies a 3-foot by 2-foot rectangular stone that would, if it could, tell a story of violent deaths. There was an Indian princess named Queen Esther, possibly from the local tribe, who took her own vengeance out on innocent farmers in the area. Some weeks during and after the battle on the 3rd of July, 1778, braves kidnapped and beat severely about a dozen men, most likely one at a time, and brought them each before Queen Esther. This woman, more savage than pretty, ordered her scouts to pin down the man, and he lay there bewildered while his head lay between the pre-chosen stone and the rounded side of the hand-hewn mace she wielded. She was angry for some reason, known only to herself. This was just one example of the savagery of war and what we as individuals are capable of. Your grandfather would tell me that he would look for old blood on that now moss-covered stone every time he would pass it by. He may still take a glance when he comes to visit. A few factors like the weather and time have determined where great battles took place. Usually, it was the decision of one man. Plans have been made up in a specific or general area, but as situations change, soldiers adapt and engage wherever the enemy has their camp, meeting their foes face to face, organized into vast lines pitted against each other. Every year, volunteer reenactors gather to commemorate battles like Gettysburg and Antietam. These reenactments take place all throughout the country, through most of the year. Attendance at these snapshots of history will be the closest we are able to come at understanding the event of how ordinary people lived then. Only so much can be learned by visiting a museum, watching a documentary, or reading a book. To use all our working senses replicated by these history buffs is a privileged and memorable way to get a sense of where we came from. Ryan knew his great-grandson was able to understand the concepts and most of the terms he used. The boy was quite intelligent for his youthful age of 10. No specific plans for the 300-year anniversary were yet planned, but discussions were occurring and suggestions were given. After further deliberation, these two friends and relatives decided that they would like to celebrate the Tricentennial in Boston. Further plans were made to possibly visit other historical sites a lot sooner. That would be a break from playing cards, fishing, or pulling weeds. Gettysburg was on their shortlist. They wanted to attend next summer, during the first few days of July, so they can see for themselves what it may have been like to be alive back then. And that was History Makes Heroes Out of Ordinary People. So I want to thank you for listening, and look for many more videos where I read from the book that I had self-published, The Lion's Shares, a collection of short stories. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please tell other people. Go out and buy the book. It's on Amazon for $1.99 for an ebook, and just Google and you'll see where things are. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.